Every time you solve a Rubik's Cube, you're almost guaranteed to turn all 6 sides at least once. If you start with the white cross like me, you probably turn the yellow side more than anything, the white side only a couple of times per solve, and the other 4 colors land somewhere in between. That's why today, I want to find out what it's like to solve a Rubik's Cube if you limit the number of sides that you're allowed to turn. Believe it or not, any Rubik's Cube scramble can be solved by just turning 5 out of the 6 sides, but how much more difficult does that make the solving process? And what if you limit yourself to just 4 or 3 or 2? Today we're going to answer all of those questions, starting with the first level of difficulty, where just one side is illegal to turn. And we're going to enforce that using a screwdriver. I'm just going to pop the center cap off here, and then tighten this screw down until the white side doesn't want to turn anymore. There we go. I'll also add a little black sticker here, just to remind us that turning this side is now prohibited. As you can see, it doesn't want to turn at all, but the other sides around it do turn just fine. Let's get started. So looking at this cross case here, what I would normally do to solve it is put in these 3 pieces first, kind of like this, and then I would do a D move to align the cross and then solve the last one. But as you can see, that D move is not possible right now, so instead we're gonna have to do it the beginner way of basically just putting in the cross pieces one at a time and then moving the next one onto the yellow side, putting it in, next one, putting it in, and putting it in until the cross is solved. So that was all very tedious, but fortunately, after that first step of making the cross, there's very few reasons that you would ever need to turn the white side again. One reason I might do it during F2L is if I had a case like this where the edge piece were already perfectly in, what I would do is take this corner piece, do a D move to bring that slot over, put the corner piece in, and then bring the slot back. That's called keyhole. It's a very useful intermediate F2L trick, but instead, we're just gonna have to do it the boring way instead. And this last one should be nice and easy to finish up too. Now, as annoying as this OLL is, I don't think it requires turning the white side at all. Most OLLs don't. You do it to pay attention though, because as soon as you start doing middle layer moves like this algorithm requires, that white side starts to move around, and all of a sudden it's not D moves that are prohibited anymore, it might be F moves or U moves, for example. In fact, I actually know an algorithm for this exact U perm that starts with M2U. So in this case, that wouldn't be allowed at all because we'd be turning the white side. Instead, we have to do the clearly superior RU version. And there we go. As easy as that, the cube was solved by turning just 5 sides. There were a few minor difficulties along the way, but nothing that couldn't be overcome very quickly. So now it's time to make another side illegal. How about green? Let's tighten this one up. There we go. And just to make sure, let's add a big piece of tape all the way across here to make sure we absolutely can't turn either of these 2 sides. All right, now as we start to scramble up this cube, you might notice one thing that's a little bit funny. There's one edge piece right here that's completely trapped. There's no way to turn it and move it from where it is without turning either the white or the green side. And so that's why it's actually impossible to pick up any old scrambled Rubik's Cube and solve it by only turning 4 sides, or any less than 4. Unless that edge piece is already where it needs to be, there's no way it's magically gonna get there unless you can turn the 2 sides next to it. But good thing for us, that means we already have one cross piece solved, so we can go ahead and move on to the next one over here. We can do this orange one like this. And then this red one over here, I would normally solve by doing D, R prime, D prime, but instead we had to take it out and then put it all the way over here to get it in. But from now on, F2L should go nice and smoothly, right? Oh, wait a minute. These 2 pieces that I just got into position to pair up into the back slot, I can't pair them up without doing an R prime right there. So how do we work around this? Well, what I think we can do is instead of inserting it into this slot, instead we can insert into the slot next to it like that, and then we can just take it back out again and now insert it into where it needs to go. Except that now that I've paired it up like this, I still need to turn the green side to put it in. Even if I try and do a sledgehammer, that still requires the green side. So instead, what I think we have to do is put it back into a different slot, and then instead of taking it out with an L move like this, we want to take it out with an R move. This way, we can insert it with an R move over here, which doesn't require the green side at all. So that was a nice little workaround. It definitely takes a bit of planning ahead and definitely steps up the difficulty a little bit, but for the most part, the rest of these F2L pairs should be pretty easy. For this one right here, I would normally do sexy move 3 times, so R, U, R prime, U prime over and over again, but since I can't do an R move, I'm instead gonna have to do the mirror of that by doing it with L moves over here. And now since most last layer algorithms require R, U, and F moves, I'm just gonna get this green side out of the way by putting it on the back, and then hopefully this algorithm will be doable, which it looks like it is. But this A perm on the other hand doesn't look like it's gonna be easy. Normally I would solve it like this by rotating and then doing R2 D2, but obviously we can't do a D2 move right now. So what if we rotate it back to where it was and try that again? Now we can't even do the R2 move. But now what if we do another U move and then try and do the algorithm over here? So R2 D2, that now works. RU, but we can't do the U, so we have to very carefully undo all of those. Our only hope left is that maybe this last rotation will work. So R2 D2, RU R prime, oh my gosh, It worked! So we just got very lucky that A perm required all 4 sides of the cube except for these 2, and only when it was in that exact orientation. Now before we move on and try and restrict 3 sides at a time, I want to know what would happen if you try and restrict not just 2 adjacent sides, but 2 opposite sides. So you're not allowed to turn white or yellow. I have a feeling it'll be a lot more difficult, but I've never tried it before, so I have no idea. So I'm just going to free this green side real quick and then restrict the yellow side, and we'll see what happens. Okay, this cube is really not happy with me right now. Tightening these 2 sides really seems to be restricting the other 4 sides, but I think we can manage. So let's scramble this cube up and see what it's like to solve it. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, when you're doing a solve on white cross, the side that you turn the most often is yellow. It kind of makes sense because almost every F2L pair, OLL algorithm, and PLL algorithm all require doing some U moves. And so I think for the sake of my sanity, it might actually be easier to start with a different cross color. It might be a little bit more confusing, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. So let's go with, how about green cross? Fortunately, we do have a lot of moves available to us that are very useful for making this cross. So we can go ahead and get these first 3 pieces in here. And where's the last one? Oh, it's over here. Unfortunately, we can't just do a quick R2 move right here to put it in. But what we can do is move the cross out of the way, move the piece out of the way, do an R2 move, and then put the cross back. And there we go, now it's solved. Now, besides these F2L pairs being impossible for me to recognize, I think this shouldn't be too much more difficult than it was last time. There are definitely some cases where I'd like to be able to turn these 2 sides. For example, right here, if I were to just do an L prime move, I would pair these 2 pieces up and be able to insert them. But instead, I guess I just have to do it the fancy way by rotating and then doing these moves like this. Now, if you try this challenge out yourself, you might find that all the F2L pairs seem to go in so easily when you have white and yellow in the front and back like this. Whereas if you try and rotate and have them on the sides, there's seemingly no way to insert any F2L pairs at all. Like, what would you even do from this angle? You can't do a sledgehammer. Whereas if you just rotate it this way and have this on the front and back, it's always super easy to get them in. And if you've ever learned ZZ, you'll know exactly why this is. It's because all the edges on the cube are already oriented. What does it mean for an edge to be oriented? It means you can get it into its correct position without doing any F or B moves. And so because we scrambled this cube without doing any F or B moves, we automatically got all our edges oriented, which means we automatically get all the easiest F2L cases, which don't require rotations or F moves. And once we get to the last layer, we know that all of our cross edges will already be oriented, giving us an easier OLL case. So all in all, this challenge just made our lives a little bit easier. But wait a minute. This OLL isn't possible. It requires basically doing an F move by turning the white side right here. So how do we solve this? Well, my fallback is to just use that one beginner's method where you do a bunch of soons over and over again. So like this, anti-soon, and there we go. Now that we're on to PLL, a lot of the cases would be really tricky to do without any F moves, but we just happen to get lucky here with a U perm that we can do with just R and U moves. And so, much like the last challenge we did where this edge piece was stuck in place, this challenge also drastically restricts the number of different ways that you can scramble the cube. It just does so in a much different way than the other one did. And so in this case, that made it easier in some ways, but also harder in some ways. Okay, what's next? I want to restrict 3 sides so that there's only 3 left over that you can turn. There's actually a couple of different ways that you can do that, so let's just try out both of them. The first one I think we're going to find is very similar to what we just did, but I want to try it again just to be sure. So just like last time, there's 2 opposite sides that we can't turn, but we also now can't turn the bottom either. We're only allowed to do R, U, and L moves. And so what I'm very quickly finding out is the more sides I restrict, the less it feels like I'm actually scrambling the puzzle. Obviously, we have 2 edge pieces that are completely trapped, but like last time, we're also leaving all the edges oriented, which makes our lives a lot easier during most of the solve. So I'm just going to start by making the white cross as usual. If you were actually doing ZZ, you would wait to put in these 2 edge pieces until you absolutely needed them, but I'm too lazy to do that. And now you can see, if we just resist the urge to ever rotate the cube, we can find really efficient solutions to all of the F2L cases. Now some of them, like this one right here, are going to really annoy me that we can't just rotate and do beginner's method. So instead we have to do something crazy like this. And even if it's more moves, it still feels really nice only having to do R and U moves and never rotate. Now fortunately this time we got an OLL case that's really easy to do with just R and U moves. Okay, now here's the hard part. As I suspected last time, we just got really lucky by getting a U perm, and so now we have to figure out how to do a complex PLL like a G perm without doing any F or D moves. Now I doubt there even exists a G perm algorithm we can do here, so we're definitely gonna have to do 2-look. And the only PLL that I can think of that only requires these 3 moves and that swaps these 2 corners around is my JA perm, which goes like this. And there we go. Now we got all the corners solved and we have a nice easy U perm to finish things off. Now if we had instead got really unlucky and had to swap 2 opposite corners, we could just do that J perm twice in 2 different positions, or I think one of my N perms actually will work too. Yeah, okay, that's actually really cool. Anyway, get it? It's time to move on to the other way that you can restrict 3 sides of turning, which is when you have 3 adjacent centers. So let me go ahead and modify this tape real quick. There we go. White side, green side, and orange side, all illegal. Let's see what happens. This time I have a feeling the last layer isn't going to be as difficult because we can do R, U, and F moves very easily, but I think F12 might be getting a little bit more challenging. So we now have 2 pieces of our white cross and a full F12 pair that are locked in place, and so it should be very easy to get our white cross, and lucky us, it's an X cross. So let's go ahead and begin with our first F12 pair here. So let's get this one in here. That wasn't too bad. And that gave us another free F12 pair. So it's as easy as just sticking that in where it needs to go. Oh, wait a minute. It's fine. Let's just do a sledgehammer to get it in. Oh, wait a minute. So much like one of those previous solves, it's now very difficult to get some of these F12 pairs in. And I think the best thing to do is to fall back on our previous strategy by inserting this into the wrong F12 pair. We're going to have to mess up this one that we already made, but oh well. And then taking it out with the opposite move, so an L move here. And then that lets us insert it where we want it, like that. And so I'm going to refrain from inserting this middle F12 pair again because, as we just found out, it's a very useful slot to have open. And so instead, we have to work with this one over here, which we can do just like this. And then, we can't get it in again. And so once again, we just put it into the wrong slot, take it out with the opposite move, and then we can put it into the slot that we want to. And now we can finally do the middle F12 pair using basically whatever moves we want to, so just beginner's method there. Now moving on to OLL, we have R, U, and F available, so we could always fall back on the beginner's method algorithms and just do this to get the yellow cross, then do soon a bunch of times, but in this case we got lucky, so it was just one easy algorithm. And then most PLLs, including this one, can be done with just R, U, and F moves, so we're pretty much home free. There we go. Worst case, you could always just do J perms to get the corners and then U perms to get the edges. Easy. Now the reason I know so much about solving with this restriction in particular is that it's exactly the same concept as 1/2 of a Siamese cube. If you think about it, this has the exact same restriction. You're allowed to turn these 3 sides, but not the 3 other sides. So every time you solve the Siamese cubes, you're literally just doing this twice, which is why I have so much experience with it. So now let's move on to restricting 4 sides of the puzzle and seeing what it's like with just 2 sides remaining. There we go. Oh, wait a minute. That's not going to be very much fun, is it? It's 1 by 1 by 3. There we go. That's better. Now, I'm not convinced this one is going to be much of a challenge either, but we might as well try it for the sake of completeness. I think it's basically going to be like when we had 3 centers disallowed in a U shape, except now we have this whole side disallowed too, so it's just going to be a slightly shorter version of that solve. Anyway, let's get started. White cross. That was easy. Now for our first F12 pair, we can do something like this to get that in there. And our second F12 pair should be nice and easy too, just like that. Now, once again, we're guaranteed to have all these edges oriented, so we could just do a bunch of soons, or if we're lucky enough to get an algorithm that we can actually do with R and U moves, we can do that as well. And now, since it's impossible to do any PLLs that require anything but R and U moves, it's impossible to get any of those PLLs either. We're never going to have 2 corners swapped, for example. It's all just going to be U perms, H perms, or Z perms, which all can be done very easily just by doing 1 or more U perms. And so interestingly, as we kept on increasing the number of sides that we restricted, the challenges kept getting more and more difficult up to a point where we had so many pieces that were just bandaged together that the rest of the cube really had so little options that it actually became easier than a normal Rubik's Cube. I think the one where we just had 2 opposite centers restricted was my favorite because we still had all the pieces in play and it had some unique challenges and benefits. I'd never actually tried that one before. That one was probably the most difficult, although the Siamese cube style version was a little bit tricky too, but I'm glad we tried out all the unique combinations of different sides that you can restrict to see the unique challenges of each one. Wait a minute, we haven't tried all of them yet. What happens if you restrict 5 sides? That's totally a puzzle, isn't it? Yeah, it's a 1 by 1 by 2. Well, I'm glad we were able to solve that one for the sake of completion. And actually, I just thought of one more. All 6 sides restricted. Bet you can't solve that one, huh? Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this fun challenge video. Let me know if you want to see more like it, and I'll see you guys next time.